A fist hammered on a cabin door in the middle of a blizzard. Inside, a man jerked awake and grabbed the rifle leaning by his bed. Nobody came up this mountain. Not in winter. Not ever. The pounding came again, weak and frantic, and under the howl of the wind he heard a voice. A woman's voice. Begging. He pulled the door open against the wind, rifle up. A young woman fell across his threshold into the firelight. Her lips were blue. Her dress was soaked through and frozen stiff. And her feet, her bare feet, were bleeding into the snow on his porch. No shoes. No coat. In the worst storm of the year. Please, she whispered, barely able to form the word. It's so cold. The man who lived in that cabin was named Jonah Reed. He had not let another living soul through that door in 6 years. What he did next, nobody saw coming. Stay with me. Jonah Reed lived alone and he liked it that way. He had a small log cabin high up in the mountains at the end of a trail that most folks did not even know was there. He raised a few horses. He hunted. He trapped in the winter and sold the furs in the spring, when the pass was clear enough to ride down to the town in the valley. He came down maybe 4 times a year. He spoke to people maybe 4 times a year. And that suited him just fine. He was 38 years old, and he had not always been a man who lived alone on a mountain. Once Jonah Reed had a wife. A home down in the valley. A whole life full of people and noise and plants. And then, 6 years back, a sickness came through that valley one hard winter, and it took his wife and it took their little girl both inside of a month. And Jonah Reed had buried the only 2 people he loved in the frozen ground, and then he had packed what he could carry onto a horse, and he had ridden up into the mountains and he had not really come back down since. Not all the way down. Not in the way that counts. He told himself he was done with people. People bring you joy, sure. But people also die. People leave holes in you that never fill back in. Up here, alone, there was nothing left to lose. No one to bury. No one to grieve. Just the work and the quiet and the long white winters. He had made his peace with it. Or so he believed. So on this night, the coldest night of the hardest winter he could remember, with a blizzard screaming down off the peak so thick you could not see your own hand in front of your face, Jonah Reed was doing what he always did. Sitting by his fire. Alone. Cleaning a rifle he did not need to clean just to have something to do with his hands. And then the knock came. His first thought was that he had imagined it. Nobody knocked on his door. The nearest cabin was 8 miles down the mountain. The pass was snowed shut. No sane person was out in this. But it came again. A frantic pounding. And a voice, thin and breaking under the wind. Jonah grabbed his rifle. Because a knock on your door, alone on a mountain in the dead of night, is more likely to be trouble than not. He had learned to be careful. Careful kept a man alive up here. He opened the door. And what he saw drove every careful thought right out of his head. A woman. Young. Half dead on her feet. Soaked to the bone and frozen, her dark hair stiff with ice, her lips gone blue. And she was barefoot. Bleeding, bare feet in 2 feet of snow, in a storm that could kill a strong man in an hour. She looked up at him with eyes that were barely holding on. Please, she breathed. It's so cold. I have nowhere, please. And then her legs went out from under her and she pitched forward, and Jonah Reed dropped his rifle and caught her before she hit the floor. Now here is the thing about Jonah Reed. 6 years of telling himself he was done with people. 6 years of walls built up around a heart that had been broken in the worst way. You would think a man like that might hesitate. Might think about the trouble a stranger brings. Might remember all the reasons he came up this mountain to get away from exactly this, from caring about another person, from being responsible for another life. And for 1/2 of 1 second maybe he did. But then he felt how cold she was. Cold like the dead. Cold like his wife had been that last morning. And something in him that he thought had died 6 years ago woke right back up. He carried her inside. He kicked the door shut against the storm. And Jonah Reed, who had not let another soul through that door in 6 years, got to work trying to keep a stranger alive. He did not know her name. He did not know where she had come from or what had driven her barefoot into a blizzard, or what was going to come up that mountain looking for her before the night was through. He just knew she was freezing to death in his arms. And for the first time in 6 years, Jonah Reed had something to lose again. He moved fast the way you have to with the cold. He got her down by the fire. He stripped the frozen dress off her. There was no time for modesty, the wet cloth was killing her, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned and then in the heavy buffalo robe off his own bed. Her bare feet were the worst of it. cut up, bleeding, white at the toes with the start of frostbite. He warmed water, not hot, just warm, and eased her feet into it, and watched the color fight its way back into them while she shook so hard he thought she might come apart. He got warm broth into her, a spoonful at a time. He built the fire up until the cabin was hot as a summer day. And slowly, over the course of an hour, the shaking eased, and the blue went out of her lips, and the woman who had been minutes from death came back from the edge. Her eyes cleared. She looked around the strange cabin, at the strange man kneeling by her with a cup of broth, and the fear came back into her face. "Easy," Jonah said. His voice was rough. He had barely used it in months. "Easy now. You are safe. You near froze to death out there. You are inside. By a fire. That is all. Nobody is going to hurt you." She stared at him. Then, slowly, she stopped trying to pull away. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My cabin. Top of the mountain. Long way from anywhere." He paused. "Name's Jonah. What's yours?" She hesitated a long moment. Like even her name was something she was afraid to give away. "Mary," she finally said. "My name is Mary." That was all she would tell him at first. Just a name. Not where she came from. Not how she ended up barefoot in a blizzard 8 miles from the nearest soul. Not what she was running from. But Jonah Reed had eyes, and he had been around hard things long enough to read them. He saw the bruise along her jaw, yellow-green and days old. He saw the rope burns on her wrists, raw and fresh. He saw the way she flinched when the wind rattled the door, like she expected something to come through it. He did not push. A man who has spent 6 years not wanting to talk about his own pain knows better than to go digging in someone else's. So he just took care of her. He gave her his bed and laid out a bedroll for himself by the fire. He found an old shirt and trousers of his that she could wear, and warm socks for her ruined feet. He fed her and kept the fire high and let her sleep, and she slept like the dead, like someone who had not slept safe in a very long time. And over the next 2 days, while the blizzard raged on outside and trapped them both in that little cabin, something began to thaw between them. Mary started to talk. Small things at first. She thanked him for the broth. She asked about the horses she could hear in the lean-to. She watched him work, mending tack, and asked if she could help, and he handed her a needle and some leather, and her hands turned out to be quick and clever. And Jonah found himself talking too. More than he had in years. The rust came off his voice. He told her about the horses. About the mountain. He did not tell her about his wife and daughter, not yet, but he found, to his own surprise, that he wanted to. 2 broken people snowed in together at the top of the world. Neither one of them whole. And without quite meaning to, in the warmth of that little cabin, they started to mend each other. On the second night, the storm finally began to break. Anne Mary, wrapped in a blanket by the fire, looked over at Jonah and gave him the first real smile he had seen from her. "You did not have to do any of this," she said softly. "Take me in. A stranger. You could have left me out there." "No," Jonah said. "I could not have." She looked at him for a long moment. "I think," she said, "this is the first time in a long time I have not been afraid." And Jonah Reed felt something in his chest he had genuinely believed was dead and buried 6 years ago, down in that valley with his wife and his little girl. He felt like a man again. A man with a reason to care about the morning. The storm died down to nothing in the night. By the 3rd morning, the sun came up clear and hard over a world buried in white, and for a little while, everything was quiet and still and almost peaceful. Jonah stepped out to feed the horses, breathing in the cold, clean air, feeling something close to hope for the first time in years. And that is when he saw them. Down at the bottom of the mountain, where the trail came up out of the trees, dark shapes were moving against the snow. Riders. 4 of them. Coming up his mountain. Coming up the only trail there was. Coming for Mary. Jonah came back inside fast, and Mary took one look at his face and knew. "They found me," she whispered. She was already backing toward the wall, her ruined feet forgotten, her whole body shaking again, but not from cold this time. "Oh God, they followed my tracks. The snow stopped and they followed my tracks right up to your door." "Who?" Jonah said. "Mary. Who is coming up my mountain?" And finally, with the riders maybe 20 minutes out, the truth came pouring out of her. Her name was not just Mary. She was Mary Calhoun. And 3 nights ago she had run from a man named Silas Vane, the richest, most powerful, most feared man in the whole territory. a cattle baron who owned half the valley and most of the men in it. Mary's father had died owing Vane money, a great deal of money, and Vane had come to collect the only way that satisfied him. He had taken Mary, not as a wife, as a possession, to settle a debt. For 2 months she had been kept like a prisoner on his ranch. And 3 nights ago, when she could not stand it one more day, she had climbed out a window in the dark and run. No time for shoes, no time for a coat, just run, up into the mountains in the snow, because she would rather freeze to death free than live one more day as Silas Vane's property. "He will not stop," she said, and her voice was breaking. "You do not understand what he is. He owns the sheriff. He owns the judge. He owns everyone in that valley. There is no law that touches him. He sent his men, and they will take me back, and they will kill anyone who stood in the way. Jonah, they will kill you. You have to let them take me. I will not let you die for me. I will go out there." "No," Jonah said. And just like that, everything changed. This was no longer 2 lonely people thawing by a fire. This was 4 armed men, sent by a powerful and lawless tyrant, riding up a mountain to drag a woman back into captivity and kill whoever tried to stop them. This was no longer about healing. This was about survival. Now listen. If you have come this far with me, if you are pulling for Jonah and Mary the way I am, do me one favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what this lonely cowboy did next is the whole reason I had to tell you this story. Now stay with me. Because Jonah Reed had made up his mind. He looked at Mary. At the bruise on her jaw and the rope burns on her wrists and the terror in her eyes. At the woman who would rather die free in the snow than live as a rich man's property. And the cowboy who had spent 6 years with nothing left to lose found all at once that he had something worth fighting for. "You are not going back out there," Jonah said, quiet and certain. "Not to them. Not ever. You hear me? Jonah, there's 4 of them. I know how many there are." He was already moving. He pulled the rifle off the wall. He took a second rifle and a pistol from a trunk in the corner. He grabbed a box of cartridges. "Get in the back. There's a root cellar under the floor, trapdoors under the bed. Get down in it and do not come up no matter what you hear. No matter what. They'll kill you. Mary." He stopped. He looked at her. 6 years ago I lost everything I ever cared about, and I could not do one single thing to stop it. I had to stand there and watch it happen, and I have hated myself every day since for not being able to save them. His jaw tightened. "I cannot save them. They are gone. But I can save you. So for once in 6 years, let me be of some use. Get in the cellar." She went. With tears streaming down her face, she went. And Jonah Reed loaded his rifles, and he looked out the window at the 4 riders coming up his mountain, and he got ready to do the thing he had failed to do 6 years ago. He got ready to fight for someone he could still save. What those 4 men did not know was who lived in that cabin. They saw a recluse. A mountain hermit. Some broken-down loner who would be no trouble at all. What they did not know, what even Jonah had nearly forgotten, was that before the valley, before his wife, before the grief that drove him up this mountain, Jonah Reed had ridden with the cavalry. He had been a marksman. The kind of man they put on a ridge with a rifle and trusted to hit what he aimed at. A thing like that does not leave a man. He just goes to sleep. This morning it woke up. The 4 riders came up the last stretch of trail and stopped in the clearing in front of the cabin, spreading out, comfortable, certain of themselves. The lead man, a big man with a scarred face, Vane's top enforcer, cupped his hands and called out, "Mary Calhoun, we know you are up here, girl. Tracks lead right to that door. Come on out and we will take you home nice and easy. Whoever is in there, this is no business of yours. Send her out and we ride away. Keep her and we burn that cabin down with you in it." Jonah's voice came back from inside, calm and flat. "She is not going anywhere with you." The big man laughed. "Old man, there are 4 of us. You want to die on this mountain over a woman that ain't even yours." "Already died once," Jonah called back. 6 years ago. Everything after that is just extra. Now get off my mountain." The big man stopped laughing. He nodded to the others and 4 hands went to 4 guns. They were fast. Jonah was faster, and he had cover, and he had the high ground, and he had spent 6 years on this mountain with nothing to do but shoot. The first man was out of his saddle before his pistol cleared leather. Jonah worked the rifle bolt and the second man spun and went down clutching his shoulder. The horses panicked at the gunfire, rearing and screaming, throwing the other 2 riders into chaos, and Jonah moved from the window to the gun slit in the side wall, He had built this cabin, he knew every angle of it, and put a round into the third man's leg before any of them had fired a clean shot back. It had been maybe 10 seconds. 2 men down and bleeding in the snow, a third clutching a shattered leg, and only the big scarred enforcer left, diving behind a fallen log, suddenly understanding that the broken old hermit in the cabin was nothing of the kind. "Who are you?" the big man shouted, real fear in his voice now. Jonah did not answer. He just waited. The standoff stretched out. The enforcer was pinned behind his log, afraid to lift his head. His wounded men were groaning in the snow. And the cold, the same cold that had nearly killed Mary, was now working against the men out in the open, while Jonah sat warm behind his walls with all the time in the world. Finally the big man called out, his voice shaking. "Vane will send more. You hear me? You can kill us all and he will just send more. 20 more. He will never stop. This is no good for you, mister, no good at all." And that was when Jonah understood the real problem. The man was right. Killing these 4 would not end it. Silas Vane owned the law, owned the valley, and would keep sending men until Mary was dragged back or dead and Jonah's cabin was ashes. Winning this fight in the snow was not enough. He needed to end it. For good. So Jonah Reed made the big man an offer through the cabin wall. He told the enforcer to drop his gun, load his wounded men onto their horses, and ride back down the mountain, and carry a message to Silas Vane. The message was this. Mary Calhoun was under Jonah Reed's protection now. And Jonah Reed had ridden with the cavalry and he knew people. Real people. Federal people, the kind even Silas Vane could not buy. A territorial marshal Jonah had served with, a man who had been looking for an excuse to bring Vane down for years. Jonah had already sent for him. And if Vane sent one more man up this mountain, or harmed one hair on Mary's head, every record of every crooked thing Vane had ever done, and Jonah knew about a few, would land on that marshal's desk. It was mostly a bluff. But it was built on just enough truth to hold. The big man, bleeding and freezing and beaten, took the deal. He had no fight left in him. He loaded his groaning men onto their horses, and he left his rifle in the snow, and the 4 of them rode back down the mountain, broken and humbled, carrying Jonah's message to the man who had sent them. And Jonah Reed stood in the doorway of his cabin, rifle in hand, and watched them go until they disappeared into the trees. Then he opened the trapdoor and he reached down, and he helped Mary Calhoun up out of the dark. She came up into his arms shaking, crying, certain she had just heard him die. And instead here he stood, alive. And the men who had hunted her were gone, broken, carrying a warning back to the man who thought he owned her. She held on to Jonah and would not let go. And Jonah, who had not held another person in 6 years, held her right back. The marshal was real. That was the part Jonah had not been bluffing about, not entirely. He truly had served with a territorial marshal years before, a hard, honest man named Cole Hutchins who did not bow to anyone. And the morning after the fight, Jonah saddled his best horse and rode down the mountain through the snow, and he sent word to Hutchins, about Silas Vane, about Mary, about a man who held people for debts and owned a valley through fear. It turned out Hutchins had been building a case against Silas Vane for 2 years. He just had never had a witness brave enough to testify. The people Vane hurt were too frightened. Too bought. Too dead. Mary Calhoun was not too frightened. Not anymore. She testified. She stood up in a federal courtroom with Jonah Reed in the row right behind her, and she told the truth about everything Silas Vane had done, to her and to others. And once one person finally stood up to him, others found their courage too. One by one they came forward. And the empire of fear that Silas Vane had built over 20 years came down in a single season. Vane went to prison. The valley he had ruled through terror breathed free for the first time in a generation. And the debt that had cost Mary her freedom, died with the man who had used it as a chain. Mary was free. Truly free. For the first time in her adult life, she belonged to no one but herself. She could have gone anywhere after that. Started over anywhere she liked. She went back up the mountain. There was never really a conversation about it. There did not need to be. She had found, in that little cabin in the worst storm of her life, the first place she had ever felt safe. And Jonah had found, in a half-frozen stranger pounding on his door, the first reason in 6 years to come back to life. They were married in the spring when the pass cleared, by a circuit preacher down in the valley, with old Marshal Hutchins standing as a witness. And the cabin at the top of the mountain, the cabin that had been so silent for 6 years, the home of a man who had buried his heart along with his family, filled up with life again. With talk and work, and after a while with the sound of children. Jonah Reed never forgot the wife and daughter he had lost. He never stopped loving them. He kept their memory like a candle that never went out. But he learned something, up on that mountain, that the grief had hidden from him for 6 long years. A heart that has been broken is not a heart that is finished. It is just a heart that is waiting. Waiting for a reason to beat again. Years later, when his children were old enough to ask, Mary would tell them the story of the night she came to the mountain. How she had run barefoot through the snow with nothing left, certain she was going to die. How she had knocked on the last door at the top of the world, expecting to be turned away like she had been turned away everywhere else. And instead, she would tell them, your father opened the door. A stranger, in the middle of the night, in the worst storm anyone could remember. He had every reason to turn me away. Every reason to protect himself. And he opened the door instead. And he never once closed it again. And Jonah Reed, older now, gray at the temples, with a family around him he had never thought he would have, would pull his wife close in the warm cabin at the top of the mountain. The man who had nothing left to lose had opened his door one freezing night. And it had given him everything back.